Hi, and welcome to the first ever episode filmed in this Hannibal Lecter-esque apartment, and here is my first souvenir from this taxidermy store, which is 2 minutes away from my apartment. So after I bought this little guy, I thought to myself, I have to write a story about it. I just had to write a story about it. So here's the story, which is going to lead into today's topic. 12th of April, 2021, Melbourne. Had there ever came a moment where you'd say to yourself, I wish I had a human skull in my apartment? I came out of my French tutorial and caught up with Thomas, Salvis, Michael, and another guy I didn't know who had a Russian accent. I told him I needed a human skull and asked if he knew a place. Salvis said that he did, and I realized the place was actually 2 minutes away from my apartment. On our way to this mysterious place, I started seeing skulls everywhere. One was in the shop windows of a herb store named Mr. Bones, and another was a spray-painted skeleton with a rose sticking out of its mouth. Eventually, we ended up at a quaint little store with a human skull I was looking for in the window. The guy wasn't at the counter, so I conjured up all kinds of images of him being a dusty old man searching through the shelves. But there he was upon his return, a guy with a yellow beard, big belly under his t-shirt, his appearance as remote as possible from an antique dealer. I asked him, "Is there a human skull for sale?" He looked up at me. "There's one here on the desk." He stooped his head. "How much is it?" I said. "Well, that's $235. He said it with that tone I had a little twang at the end, which meant I knew you couldn't afford it. I browsed the rest of the store and saw all sorts in there. An electric chair, a letter writing set, magnifying glasses of all sorts, and storm glasses. It was a perfect store, and I asked the guy, "Don't you feel like a serial killer living here?" "I don't live here," he said, and didn't smile at all. I looked at a taxidermy section and found a bunch of insects and skeletons of small animals. I hovered over the desk and had my eyes on a scorpion at first, but I thought that would freak out any guests I would have over. So I landed on a little skeleton of a... "I'm sorry, is this a chicken?" I said. "No, it's a little finch," the guy said. "I'd like to buy it," I said. The guy picked it up and wrapped it. "I'm surprised the skull is that expensive though," I said. "Well, it's a cast of the exact dimensions of a human skull. It's made in Germany, and medical students use these all the time because it's so precise." "Well, I'm coming back for that skull." I looked at the skull at the counter. "You see me around here a lot then. Do you own the store?" "Yeah," he said. "Well, see you around." So that was a little story that I wrote yesterday about the taxidermy store visit. So that's really the first lesson of telling a story. First lesson is your life is worth writing about. If I can conjure up a story about, a weird encounter in a taxidermy store, if I can conjure up a story of me trying to buy a human skull for whatever weird reasons, you can write a story about, for example, heading into a pancake parlor and meeting a waiter who was probably new and who was kind of creepy with the way he spoke. Or you can simply write a story about, moving into a new apartment, which is the new entry, the latest Metropolitan entry on my blog, which you can check out in the description down below. There's so many instances in your life that you can document. There's so many instances where they seem bland at first, but the act of writing them down is going to send you into this detached mode of observation. And this observation is really what distinguishes, sort of like writing from many other art forms. You're taking a new perspective upon something mundane. You're putting color into something otherwise bland. And you're really trying to work out, what is it that's beneath the surface? What is it that's kind of like the stuff that everyone misses, but nevertheless you as a writer, you need to capture. So for the past 4 months, I kept one of these story entries every single day. So from the end of from the end of November, all the way to the start of December, and all the way through, January to March, I kept a story entry every single day. And now it's like the 13th of April. I've already got 12 story entries ready to go in my computer from the 1st of April. So it's a very deliberate effort of trying to write about one little event every single day on my part, which I find, it's excellent for practicing storytelling. And that's going to bring us to the second point that I want to bring up in today's video, which is that a lot of people struggle with writing a story about their day or constructing a narrative out of their day because they don't know where to start. Should I write about this event or that event? Should I write about this thing right here or that thing right there? Or if you want to keep a memory bank, if you want to really put yourself in a position of a storyteller, which story should you tell? Which story is important enough to warrant a page? You have to be very selective with the scene that you're trying to write, because your day is like thousands of moments stitched together into 24 hours. You spend 8 hours sleeping, we don't have to talk about that, but the rest of these waking hours of yours, and if you are a rather observant person, let's say, you're gonna end up with like thousands of events that you can write about. Be very selective, and don't be afraid to like neglect certain events that are just like halfway important, halfway not important, and only write about one snippet of a very specific scene every single day, and that's going to turn into your story. Basically, that's going to force you to practice this art of imposing a narrative upon scattered events. It's kind of like imposing a 5-act theater structure upon a very scattered play. It's kind of like turning your life into theater. That's literally what it is. Choose one that's very significant and write about that on a daily basis. For example, in the latest story, exclusive story for patrons of the show, I wrote about this pancake parlor encounter with this waiter. They had a very funny way of, showing us the menu. They had a very funny way of, inviting us to the table. It felt like he was about to murder us halfway through the meal. So I wrote about that on that very day. It was about like 300 words. It turned out to be to be like a self-contained story that I can put out there as a completed story. And speaking of finding a story from your day, today's episode is in part brought to you by Skillshare, and there is a fantastic course by a fellow YouTuber, actually, Nathaniel Drew, on this very topic. We have different perspectives on storytelling. Nevertheless, there are a ton of lessons to be learned from this course. I'm currently working through this course myself, and so many of the things that he talked about just really opened up wells of ideas that I hadn't considered before. So if you like the material presented in this video, I think you'll really like that course. And Skillshare as a platform is extremely affordable. It comes down to less than $10 a month. So it's cheaper than Netflix, and it has all sorts of courses on there that you can explore, not just storytelling, not just writing, but also photography, also cinematography, or even cooking if you're into that line of work. And as a viewer of the show, the first 1,000 students will have access to a premium membership for free if you click the link in the description down below. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back to the video. Let's talk about like the overarching reason why I'm doing this, the reason why I'm writing every single day, the reason why I'm like practicing this craft of storytelling. On one hand, it's just passion. Simply, I find a lot of pleasure out of writing, and it's simply an act of just offloading certain things. It's compulsion to write about something so I can resolve it in my head. Otherwise, my brain is too full. Filled to the brim. I have to have some sort of like offloading mechanism for me to put stories on a page. And you might have your own methods. Maybe your method is journaling your philosophical insights. Maybe your method is painting about the day, or creating one piece of cartoon every single day. But for me, it's the act of storytelling. It's telling a story about the day. That's sort of like my mode of writing. It's just a way for me to sort of like build up this repertoire of events that I can draw from to work on bigger essays. These daily entries, they're all sort of like really rough around the edges. They're not exactly things that I would publish, but they're sort of like the raw material. All the pieces on my website, they're sort of like the gems from these scattered diary entries. So if I find a theme somewhere, for example, I'm currently working on a piece about Melburnians and tote bags, because right here in Melbourne, we have a very sort of like prominent tote bag culture around here. So I'm currently working on a piece about tote bags. So the narrative of the main piece, for example, the tote bag piece, it's sort of like a Frankenstein stitching together of all the vignettes about tote bags that I've written in my diary entries. So if I have this repertoire around, I'm not gonna run into the trouble of like, what should I write about? I have a topic, but I don't know what to write about. For me, it's rather easy for me to pull up like examples, for me to pull up scenes, for me to pull up stories, encounters, conversations that I had with strangers. So it's really a device for freezing time. For me, if I run into something that's memorable, if I, spend a day that's very memorable, it's sort of like just cheap for me to let it go, for me to not write about it, right? For example, the housewarming party that I had a few days ago, it was frankly amazing. And it's one of those days where at the end of it, you think to yourself, I wish I could have devised a way to freeze every moment of that housewarming party. And we know we're immortal humans, we can't slow down time and, let alone freeze time. But I think writing is the closest thing that we have to freezing time. To a still life or to a portrait. With a repertoire around, you're always going to have memories. And these memories are not merely just snapshots from your phone. They're a little deeper. They're a little more personal. And if you want to work on like a personal essay, which is kind of like my favorite form of writing, so far, if you want to construct a personal story or personal essay out of that, it's going to be easier for you to have all of these pieces of reference material. And frankly, it doesn't take much effort. It's, what, like 100 to 200 words a day? I think you can do that. In conclusion, pick small pockets out of your day to construct a narrative out of. They don't have to be big, they don't have to be major, but write about that time when you have to go pick up detergent for laundry. Write about that weird encounter that you had with the guy downstairs at a convenience store. Do it on a daily basis and build up the repertoire of memories that you can draw from to work on. For example, creative nonfiction or fiction. And I think that's all I have for today's video, and I hope you guys are having a great week so far. Leave me your comments down below. What's your way of telling a story about your day? What is your way of documenting your life? What's your way of freezing time? I'd like to hear about it. Nevertheless, thank you for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys later.